Hello and welcome back to Azure Terraformer. Last episode we declared war on GUIDs and won. This episode we're going to add a new feature to our module that's going to allow us to add group owners and handle situations where the Terraform user and the group owners might conflict. We're also going to use ChatGPT in some fun and interesting ways so that we don't have to keep everything in our gray matter, which I would not recommend doing. So it should be a pretty fun episode. Anyways, without further ado, let's get coding. I did want to change the owner. So right now I'm using the owner, which is the AzureAD client config, but I would like to pass in an owner for the groups themselves. So we'll just declare a new variable called group owner. And for group owners, I'm going to add myself in here. And then now what I want to do is, so group owners is currently a hard-coded list of objects. But what I want to do is I want to add this object ID in here because I do want the Terraform user to be able to use this. Because sometimes the Terraform user might be me if I'm running locally, but the Terraform user might also be an identity like a service principal or a user-assigned ID that my pipeline runner is set up with. So I want to make sure that I still grant the Terraform user ownership of this group, but I may have other users that I want to have included there as well. So we'll create a new collection. We'll just call this group admins. And what I want to do is I want to create a list here. I want to output a list, but I want to take an individual item, which is this Terraform user here, and I want to concatenate it with my var input, which is the group owners. But group owners is a list. So I can't have a list that has a string, which is an object ID, and then another list. So what I need to do is I need to find a way to collapse these lists together. Now, I don't know the function off the top of my head. And this is also a great place where I could ask ChatGPT to help me out. So this helps me find the correct function and learn how to use it in context. Now, I could go spelunking the official documentation, but some of the Terraform functions have kind of weird names, right? And I don't have them all committed to memory. So having ChatGPT in my back pocket can really help out get the answer in a much quicker fashion. So it looks like all I need to do is just take concat of that string. So in this case, now the individual string is going to be my object ID, and that's still going to be in a hard-coded thing. And then my list of strings is the group admins, right? So now I just have to get this collapsed up into here, and we should be okay. Is that the name of my variable? So now all I need to do is change this to local.groupowners, and we should be good. Ha! We run into another problem. Because of the nature of this AzureAD client config, the way that it picks up whatever your authentication context is currently, this could sometimes be me, my object ID as a user, and it could sometimes be a service principal's object ID. So in order to have complete idempotence, i.e. I want this to run no matter what context that I'm in, I need to make sure that I watch out for duplicate user IDs. So let's go ask ChatGPT to help us solve this problem. We go grab concat and we say, okay, that worked. Okay, that worked. Here's the code that I landed on. However, I get an error whenever the AzureAD client config.current.objectID is already in my var.groupowners. How can I dedupe the collection to ensure there are no repeating values? So I like to always, when I prompt ChatGPT with code, I always like to reference the code and then add the code in at the last second. I think it helps it kind of tell where my question is and where the code begins. So it looks like there's a wonderful function called distinct, and I can pretty easily just wrap my concat with that, and we're off to the races. So this should solve all my problems, I'm thinking, unless this is a ChatGPT hallucination, but I don't think it is. Oh, So I think I preemptively solved this problem. I actually need another data source because I'm assuming that these group owners are object IDs, but they're not. So I kind of have to do this join a little bit later. So let's add my group owners. So I have to go look up my group owners. So actually I need to start with just, so this is going to help me iterate across my group owners. Now I need to have a combined list, combined owners, and I'm going to distinct concat. Now in this case, I don't think this data source really needs to be a for each. And because I'm working with a list, I think it might be easier, just to iterate using a count. And because I'm not creating anything using a data source, I'm not really going to create churn here. And there we go. Because my combined owners is actually doing a distinct on my name, and my name is appearing in there twice. I've got the AzureAD client config, current.objectID is my object ID. And then when I get the data source of all the group owners, which is my email address, and I get all of the object IDs for those from that data source, which only contains my user, then when we do a concat, we're going to have a list that has my object ID twice, and then when we do a distinct, we'll only have my object ID left one time. And because I've already provisioned it that way, there is no change, and the Terraform plan comes back correctly. So let's clean this up a little bit so it's a little bit more readable, because this is kind of nasty. I'm going to put some of these on new lines so we can kind of see what's going on. Distinct concat, and then I've got two collections. One is a single item collection, and the other is a splat operator to grab all of the object IDs off of this dynamic data source that I use the count operator on. Now, in this case, it's okay to use count. You see a lot of people railing against count, but in this situation, I think count's perfectly fine. I'd have to do a lot more gymnastics to not use count here, because ultimately I want to get a collection of these combined owners at the end of the day. And the impact of drop creating or doing an inline update to the owners list is a pretty low risk activity. So I think this is probably the best solution. Now, because we do have some shared resources in here, the concept of a group owner transcends both admin and reader. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refactor this a little bit so that my main resources are isolated in the main file, because they're actually being used in both places. So anytime that I've got group owners are being used across both the admin group and the reader group. And so this allows me to maintain parallelism between the admin group and the reader group, making both those files much more readable, and then isolating shared logic in a place that makes sense, right? Because this theoretically spans across the entire project, which makes sense that it lives in main.tf. Well, that's it. We have a complete solution where we can manage members and owners of our groups. In the next episode, we will modularize this functionality by refactoring and extracting this functionality into its own local module, thus cleaning up our code and making it much easier to pump these out at scale. Anyways, more to come. If you're enjoying this content, please smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a lot. Until next time, this is the Azure Terraformer, signing off.